Hey, adventurers, this is Mike Putman welcoming you back to No Tourist Allowed, your go-to podcast for all great things travel.
And I'm James Ferrara. We wanted to remind you about our amazing 7-night Virgin Voyages cruise giveaway that is still up for grabs.
One lucky winner will get the luxury of a sea terrace cabin with the freedom to choose your ship and sailing date.
And entering is super easy, guys. You can join our newsletter, tell us your favorite travel destination and airline, visit our YouTube channel, or even just refer a friend to the podcast.
Check the details in our show notes for the link to enter or visit our website directly at notouristallow.com.
Now, let's get started with today's episode.
Welcome to No Tourists Allowed, a podcast where two recognized travel industry executives with a combined 71 years on the inside of travel and technology give up their secrets to the thing everyone wants to do. Travel better, spend less, and see more of the world. Here are your hosts, Mike Putman and James Ferrara.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Putman.
And I am James Ferrara. And Mike, you have the 70 years and I have one, right? That's not the way.
I was just actually, as our producer Nathaniel was going through that, I was calculating in my head. I think that number might be a little bit low.
All right. It's all where we will admit to, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to No Tourists Allowed. And this is the podcast where we try to help you travel better, travel in a more authentic way, a more memorable way, and maybe steer clear of some of the more typical touristy things to do. So we try to pepper in some very specific tips. Mike and I have been known to enjoy a meal now and then. So we often have restaurant recommendations for you, hotel recommendations for you, experience recommendations for you. And we've been sharing our manifesto with you this season, about a dozen points, our advice, certainly our view on the kind of travel we'd like to see you enjoy. Right, Mike?
Yeah, just to open up your eyes and see things a little bit differently. And I think if you experience travel in a real authentic, what my kids call a non-touristy way, you expose yourself to more and more new cultures, and it really can open your eyes and it can change your perspective on life. And that is a big part of my why I'm still doing this, is that the change that you can see through people who haven't had the opportunity to travel, in a real way. Let's just call it a real way. And when you see those people come back, or you actually see them in the middle of their travel, and they're seeing these new cultures, new foods, new things, and their mind just opens up, and it becomes less about them. Oftentimes when we're pushing things away, we call other people them, and more about us. And that's what drives me. That's a big part of my driver, to stay in this wacky business. But we do have a senior person with us today who's part of this wacky business. And that wacky business is Norwegian Cruise Lines, one of the premier cruise lines. And we're so happy to have the Senior Vice President of Sales, John Chernesky, on. Good day, John. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thank you and James for having me.
Oh, great to see you. Great to see you, John. And you've got, we're going to get into it with you because you've got it must be 25 years in the cruise industry?
You're very kind. I'm older than that. It's, I think I'm going into year 32, right out of kindergarten. Really? And here I am. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So we're going to try to make use of that. But we want to start out by helping our listeners get to know you a little bit. We have a little tradition here of Mike asking some rapid fire questions, kind of putting you in the hot seat about your personal travel style.
Love it.
Exactly. So just The first thing that comes to your mind, John, and we've got 5 or 6 of these questions, so just a short answer is fine. But one we normally start with is, what is your favorite hotel brand or individual property, and why that might be?
Oh, it's a property that no longer exists. It was on the island of Moorea, and it was now I'm forgetting the name of it. Oh my God!
There was an Intercontinental there.
It was the Intercontinental. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we did a few nights there and closed right before the pandemic, or maybe during the pandemic. Just a wonderful overwater bungalow experience with my family. You can't go wrong. But having just stayed at the Ritz-Carlton in Kapalua on Maui, I guess I'm pretty spoiled. Love that experience.
Yeah, those are
great examples.
Yeah, Moorea is a beautiful place. And for our listeners, a lot of people say I want to go to Tahiti. Well, Tahiti is a place in the French Polynesians, right? So it's kind of similar, like saying I want to go to Hawaii, but you go to Maui, Hawaii. Not exactly the same, and Moorea is an island very close to Tahiti, with a lot less commercialism. It's just a gorgeous place, and one of those islands that have the over the water bungalows, which is a really, really cool experience.
Yeah.
So, John, what's your favorite destination? And when you're thinking about that, is there a restaurant or two, or an activity that makes this your favorite destination?
Well, I feel very spoiled that I've been able to travel, and it's hard. It's like picking your favorite child when you say, what's your favorite destination? Honestly, for me, although I have twin boys and I have a dog named Murphy, and Murphy I typically say is my favorite son because he's much nicer. But I will say, I'll get a little sentimental. My mom passed about 5 years ago, and one of the trips we did with her before she died was going to Alaska. And I've been very fortunate through my career to spend a lot of time in Alaska, both on work trips and on pleasure trips. And so Alaska is a broad destination. If I won the lottery, I'd own a home in Alaska. It's that meaningful to me. And so whether you're in Glacier Bay or just in the town of Juneau or Ketchikan, wherever you are, I love it there. There's something about it. In terms of restaurants, that's a great question. If you've got some cash and you like crab, which I do, Dungeness crab in particular, or king crab, the Tracy's Crab Shack in Juneau, it's this little hut, right? It's not even a proper building. You could easily spend $1,000 on crab just for lunch, which is nuts, but it's pretty special.
No, going to have to look that up. I mean, Alaska is, it's beautiful, physically beautiful, right? The nature is incredible there, but also there's a kind of frontier spirit there. It is a bit hard to define, but I agree with you. Really compelling.
There's an interesting history on Skagway, if you want to go look that up. That was known as the place where anybody that was either trying to escape something, whether it was an ex-wife or husband or the law, somehow ended up in Skagway. So that's got that rough mentality there, which is quite fun.
I'll make a note of that. Skagway.
for a future destination because of that. So, John, what is the coolest shore excursion you've ever been on?
Well, it wasn't you're talking shore excursion off a cruise or just like a day trip that I've done?
Either one,
anything. Well, I would say a combination of, I'll give you two answers. One is a true shore excursion up in Alaska, helicopter trip out to the Mendenhall Glacier. And then we were basically alpine mountaineering for a couple of hours with the helmets and the ice axes and the crampons on our feet. And it was fantastic. And that we did not that long ago with my family. Before we had kids, back when we had a lot of fun, we would go scuba diving a lot. And I've been to the Galapagos Islands. And so to be scuba diving there and seeing everything there is on steroids, everything is bigger, whether it's a sea lion or a penguin or a seahorse, the whale sharks, in particular sharks. That was magical. It's something years ago I did that and I still remember it.
Wow, sounds great except for the sharks.
Oh, they're fantastic. They're mostly harmless, James. Just don't poke them.
The mostly part.
Yeah,
that
when
worries.
you're in the water and you got like a 9-foot Galapagos shark, and it's called a Galapagos shark because it's endemic to that region. It doesn't not found anywhere else in the world. You tend to give it its berth, but it's really not looking out for you. It's looking out for other things. So,
Yeah.
Interesting. You know what's funny, James, is a few weeks ago we had another guest on, and we asked the excursion question, and they said the same thing about that trekking in Alaska. Exact same thing.
I did a helicopter to Mendenhall, and I had like a crazy ex-Vietnam helicopter pilot, and we were doing like stunts and barely made it back to the ship. So it was memorable too, but for a different reason.
I remember doing a helicopter trip in Alaska years ago where it was called the pilot's choice. And the pilot would land on 2 different spots out on the ice fields or on the glacier. It was up to him to decide that day, or her. And the pilot landed, and we were in this crevasse and on this glacier coming down. And I said to the pilot, we're walking around and drinking the glacier meltwater. And I said, are there any animals around here? You get bears around? He's like, oh, no. He said, look around, there's nothing to eat. It's all just barren rock and the ice. And so, okay, so we get in the helicopter, we're taking off. As we're taking off, a bear runs right in front of, this is a grizzly bear, right in front of our helicopter. And I said, didn't you just say we would have been eaten if we had left 2 minutes later?
Yeah. The fun of travels. No.
Close to nature, a little too close.
So, John, when you travel for business or personally, are you an aisle or a window guy?
Well, I'm a window guy because I don't want to be disturbed, but I also have the bladder of a hamster. And so I have to really schedule my liquid intake. And I'm also a considerate traveler. So I don't try to bother the person next to me. If I do have to get up, I wait for them. And hopefully they do get up, because if not, I have to climb over them or ask them to move.
I think you might be our first window person that we've had on, but
Yep.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And one last thing, do you carry on or do you check your luggage typically?
I do everything in my power to carry on. I have a trip coming up that's going to take me 10 days on 3 different sections, 2 different cruises, 1 land thing, and I've got multiple outfits, and I am strategizing how I can avoid checking that bag because I'll never see it again.
Right on, John. You're in my camp, clearly in my camp on that one.
You know, I used to say, I mean, obviously the 3 of us travel, professionally. I travel every week. And I used to say I've never lost my luggage. And then on a recent trip this year, my luggage went astray in one of these airport meltdown weekends. And it showed up on my doorstep a week later with no communication from the airline or anything. I just happened to open my front door and my suitcase had found its way home.
Amazing.
John, let's talk a little bit about your company. So NCL, for a lot of our listeners may not know about NCL. What's your brand promise at NCL? What are you about?
Yeah, our brand promise is really about giving you the freedom to choose what you want to do, when you want to do it. We used to be a cruise line that only went to kind of, I would call it fun in the sun environments and shorter cruising. And we now go 421 ports around the world, 118 countries, 19 ships. Europe, Alaska, Caribbean are our biggest. We've got a year-round ship in Hawaii. We go to Asia, Australia, the exotics. So we kind of cater to a very wide audience when it comes to the destination. We are a contemporary cruise line, but we go to what I call premium destinations, the places I just mentioned, which people book, a year or more out because they want to plan their next summer, and they're doing that right now pretty heavily. We also have, I would say, a great multi-generational travel opportunity because we have what's called the Haven on our ships, which is a suite experience, and it's a ship within a ship, meaning you have a key card to get into that space. You've got your suite, you got your concierge, you got your private butler, private dining, bars, observation lounge, all for you. You never want to leave it. James is nodding along. I know he loves that kind of special attention, as he should. Who doesn't? So imagine you have the grandparents who have the money. They want to take care of themselves, and the rest of the family stays in a nice balcony cabin. You got water slides, race tracks for the kids, good shows, good food. we truly try to give something for everybody. But those grandparents at the end of the day can escape from the rest of the family and just lock themselves away in the haven, which I recommend.
Yeah, I'm a haven guy. I mean, you've got your own restaurant on most of the ships. You've got concierge assistants, got a bar in there. It's quieter, it's private. The fitting out of the cabins is more luxurious, and the rest of the ship is beautiful also, but there's just something really special about the haven. So I'm a big fan, John. So our listeners who are watching us on our YouTube channel will see behind you a big sign and that says Viva, and tell us a little bit about that. What's going on?
Well, it's our brand new ship, our 19th ship in our fleet. James, you and I are going to be there next week for the inauguration. Very excited. She's the second ship in that class. The first ship was the Prima. It's a really wonderful design ship, really bringing the outdoors and captivating people into that experience of, let's dine outside. Let's enjoy that experience. When you're at sea, there's nothing quite like it. And to take advantage of that. Plus the interiors are gorgeous and more
Brazilian restaurant.
Yeah, especially restaurants are fantastic.
And the sign says Beetlejuice.
Yeah, don't say that 3 times. But yes, we are doing the Broadway show Beetlejuice. For those that don't know, Beetlejuice went to Broadway. We all know the movie, and the show is fantastic. And we're actually premiering that show next week for us, James. It's been out for a little while now, and the cast and crew are doing an amazing job delivering that. Looking forward to seeing that.
And if we have listeners who haven't been on a big ship cruise in the last number of years, I mean, when you say you're doing the Broadway show Beetlejuice, it's not some like skinny down version. These are full productions with full sets, and I mean, it's really like you're on Broadway, and it's incredibly fun. It's one of my favorite things to do on a cruise ship, and I know that isn't particularly about no tourists allowed or sense of place or anything, but it's just incredibly fun and enjoyable, and I love to do it. And usually, if there's a couple of performances on the cruise, I go to more than one.
Yeah, that's a great point you raised about it. It's not just a traveling road show where they're going to do 1/10 of what you're going to see on Broadway. It is a licensed product where the owners of the producers of that show want to maintain that integrity, and so everything about it, the costumes, the staging, the lighting, the talent that has to go through all the rehearsals, it's a full-fledged production, and it's for free. So you pay a lot of money to go see these things on Broadway, and to have that experience, like you say, why not see it more than once? It's really a special experience.
But bringing this back around to our ethos here at No Tourists Allowed, how do you get a real sense of place if you're traveling on a cruise?
Yeah, so you imagine you're on a ship and you've got, let's say, 3,000 people, and you think, oh my God, 3,000 people, that's a lot of people. Well, keep in mind, these ships are very large, and there is a tremendous amount of space. The way these ships are designed is to create multiple venues with smaller capacities, so you never feel like you're on a ship with 3,000 people. That's the ultimate goal for when our team is designing these ships. You want to feel it. Ultimately, it's about connecting, right, with the people that you travel with, or making new friends on a cruise. And that is the beauty of a trip, that you're going to run into random people that may have that same affinity for the same bourbon at a bar at night, or going on that shore excursion together, and you start and create could be lifelong friendships, or you're just there to connect with your family, and you find those intimate spaces. You tend to kind of find your own path, and you get into your routine with the people you're traveling with. And I have been on many cruises, and I've never felt, wow, there's so many people here. I just feel like the service is great, and I feel catered to.
I'm always sort of struck, actually, in the elevators open and there's nobody in them, and you think 3,000 people, 4,000 people are going to be crammed in with people, but actually, you're right, because of the design of the ship and just how much space there is.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that way at all. But let's say we're on a cruise and the ports of call are interesting islands or places we haven't been before. There's an opportunity to, the ship itself is a destination, right? So there's that. But there's an opportunity to get a good sense of other destinations, the ports of call you visit through what? I guess the excursion programs on board?
Yeah. So I think, let's take Europe as an example. I recommend people who have not been to Europe before go on a cruise. Obviously, a Norwegian cruise would be preferred. And I say that because you have a chance in a short window of time to visit multiple countries with multiple ports and feel like I would almost say it can be overwhelming because we at Norwegian spend so much time in port. There are many cruises where there's no days at sea. It's port after port after port because we want you to experience as much of that destination as possible. That can be exhausting, so bring your comfortable shoes. And I highly recommend you take a post-trip sabbatical, a couple days, maybe in that city before you fly out so you can relax and obviously you get to experience that city. But the short excursion program you talk about is an amazing way to feel like that you've seen, if you have a limited window of time, let's say you got 12 hours in port, that I recommend to people, the last thing I want to see people do is pull into that port and say, honey, what are we going to do today? I think you've then missed out on the chance to maximize your time and experience, whether you want to do a museum tour in the morning or whether you want to walk around the city or whether you want to go on, whatever it is in the afternoon, that you really are packing as much in, or just you want to go to a local restaurant. You don't have to do an organized short excursion. That's totally up to you. You can get into the city. If you're in Barcelona, as an example, you can just walk the Rambla and just go from tapas to tapas and maybe hit the, Picasso Museum, whatever it might be. There's so many options.
I have to admit, sometimes I do feel like that. Like I'm not going to get on and organize. I'm just going to go get lost on my own. Right.
Yeah. And that really rings true when people ask me about going to Hawaii, that and from the East Coast, it's not a destination that people go to every year like they might from the West Coast just because of the distance. But if it's going to be a once in a lifetime trip, I say take a cruise because you're going to get so much benefit from being on a ship, unpacking one time, but being able to travel at night and see lots of different ports.
Yeah, or even overnights. You've got on our Hawaii trip, it's a 7-day trip. There's no days at sea. You've got overnights in Maui and in Kauai.
I love those.
You can really get a sense of the destination, having that meal ashore if you want to do it. Go to a luau.
Stay out a little bit.
Yeah, not feel pressured. Yeah, there you go.
I've been to Hawaii many times, and I went on
in trouble many times too.
Yeah, well, we'll take that for another time. But doing the cruise and doing the NCL cruise was, without a doubt, hands down, the best way to do it. And are you guys still the only ones that are able to do that?
We are. We're the only company that has the way the ship is flagged, which means we have a certain percentage of our crew are Americans on board, which is not usually the case based on foreign flag vessels. We don't have to call it a foreign port, and so we have a very easy way of experiencing all the major islands in 1 week, whereas other cruise lines have to sail quite a bit across the ocean to come from the mainland to do it.
And just for our listeners, John, can you kind of explain a little bit more that rule that would give you the ability to do it and not a foreign flagged carrier?
Yeah, it's a very old law that basically they call the Jones Act, which means that if a foreign flag vessel is calling on American ports, you have to also have a foreign port as part of that trip. So whether, like, let's say you're doing Hawaii and you had to sail out of Los Angeles, you would have to stop back in Mexico on the way back or on the way there to qualify for that rule. You see it a lot in Alaska. If you sail out of Seattle, you can't just go from Seattle and only do Alaskan ports. You typically see a call in Victoria, part of British Columbia, which last I checked is in Canada. Beautiful island, by the way. Beautiful spot, the Bucard Gardens. I'm not a garden guy, but if you're in Victoria, go to the gardens. I tell you what, it is fantastic.
Yep. So I don't want to leave out that cruise lines also bring the sense of place on board, right? So if you're cruising in a particular part of the world, through menus, through onboard entertainment, maybe even lectures, right?
Yeah, all the above. I mean, and depending on the length of the voyage and how many days are at sea, we try and infuse as much as we can from a culinary standpoint, drinks, which I'm a big fan of, having those folkloric shows. When we're talking Hawaii and having people come on and do the folkloric shows is always a big hit. But those speakers, they could be an expert in that region there to talk about whatever the subject might be. We're really trying to bring as much of the destination onto the ship. Mike, when you sailed Hawaii, did you feel like you were in Hawaii throughout your trip on the ship, or did you?
I did. Yes, absolutely. And they brought on not just dancers, but they brought on local performers at every port.
And you got laid, right?
Several times.
All right, let's move on to something a little more serious, because I think this is top of mind. I see this anyway with our customers at NTA Travel. We now are past the pandemic, which was the conversation for several years, right? And thankfully it's not anymore. But the new conversation seems to be about environmental responsibility and taking care of this world that we are traveling around and seeing, or in our case, the three of us, the world that we're out there selling, actually. So some people have criticized cruise lines for being environmentally, not environmentally responsible. What do you say to that, John, as a knowledgeable 30-something year veteran of the cruise industry?
Well, it's interesting when I look back on my career, as you say, and from early 90s when I started to now, and how our industry has really shifted in such a positive way. Everything from reusable plastics and the recycling efforts on board, and eliminating reusable, like single-use, I should say, plastics,
right.
Eliminating single-use plastics, the types of fuel that's being used, and the how technology and innovation in technology will, I think, be constantly integrated into the cruise ships moving forward. And you see every cruise line now has, because we're all in this together. This isn't something where I personally want to stand up on a stage and say we're the most like nobody wins in that regard. We really are all aligned on this, and every cruise line is doing the best we can to minimize our carbon footprint, minimize the waste that takes place on board, and the energy consumption, the fuel consumption through technology, LED lighting, all the little things add up to big things.
Yeah. Even the way the hull is painted, sometimes, right? All of these things.
Yeah, the fuel efficiency and absolutely. It's a very important part of our focus, and we've got a dedicated team that does nothing but that. It's important.
I want more travelers to be aware of it, and even beyond that, cruise lines, I know this is true of Norwegian also, donate to oceanographic conservation organizations, and just do a lot, spend millions and millions of dollars to protect the oceans and to limit. And now, what's been happening lately is some even destination stewardship, we call it. So there are cruise lines that are not pulling into certain ports that are more fragile than others and using alternate embarkation places, right? So I'm not sure our listeners are aware of all that. And if you are interested, if this is of concern to you, be an educated traveler and consumer. Go to the website of the cruise line you're considering traveling with, or the vacation partner, or whomever, and you'll find lots of information about this if you seek it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go to some personal stuff, and I don't know. have a guest with you, a special guest with you for this podcast?
Oh, my word.
So those is audio. I'm showing a bobblehead of myself, which kind of looks like Joe Pesci and John Travolta had a baby. Doesn't look anything like me, which is why it's funny. Yeah, I'm known for having this stupid bobblehead and love him dearly. He's got a bit of an attitude, so I don't really want to have him featured too much.
Okay. Well, whether it's you or bobblehead who answers, we want to get some tips from you for our listeners to travel in this more authentic and more memorable way. So is there anything special you do when you go to a new destination or a favorite destination? Maybe when you arrive at the hotel, anything that, increases your enjoyment or helps you get to know a place better?
I'm a researcher and I like to plan in advance when I go on trips. Not everybody's like that. Some people just spur of the moment. You want to take it as it comes, and that's fine. I've done it both ways. And I remember just a random thought when I was on my honeymoon. We were in Australia, and we had one night in Sydney. We had done most of our time scuba diving in these beautiful resorts up in Northeast in the Cairns area. We had one night in Sydney, and we hadn't had any plans. We had nowhere for dinner. There was a guy who was bringing our bags to the room, and I said, so the answer is talk to somebody who lives there, right? Get some input. And I said, where should we go for dinner? And he said, there's a great Thai restaurant down on the quay, overlooks the Opera House. There's a balcony. And we're like, okay. So we just wandered down there, got lucky with a wonderful seat and overlooking the Opera House for dinner on our last night in Australia. So talking to people locally about what do you recommend? And I get the Yelps of the world are meant to represent the aggregation of all those comments. But there's just something about talking to the concierge at your hotel or the valet or the bellhop who's lived there. What do you recommend? And ask the question to say, where do you recommend that isn't as popular for tourists, but is more for locals? Because what the first sign of success of a restaurant is when I walk in, and let's say I'm in Japan, and all I see are Japanese people. That's what I want to see. If I walk in and see a bunch of American tourists, I tend to feel like it's not as authentic, which is exactly what this whole podcast is about, right? Is getting the flavor of that local culture. And it can be a hole in the wall place. Those are often the best places, but getting that advice from a local, I would recommend.
Great advice. Great advice.
Yeah, we're with you on that.
John, just one last question. Is there anything you do, any tricks or hacks that you do when you take a flight that you could share with the audience? Anything you pack special or?
I actually have a little travel pouch that I bring with me that James came from the Japanese Tourism Association that we got on our trip to Japan several years ago. And in there I have my eye mask, my earbuds, all my chargers, all that kind of stuff. So depending on the flight, if it's an overnight flight, like a red-eye flight, I tend to go into the flight. I have made sure I've gone to the bathroom. I have not drank any water. I have fed myself. I am not reliant upon anything, but I am going to go to sleep to maximize my time of sleeping while I'm on that nighttime flight. If it's a daytime flight, I'm enjoying the heck out of it. And I'm, going to load up my iPad with some movies. Actually, if my boss is listening, I'm on my laptop working usually. Jet lag is the issue. And my tip for jet lag is when you get there, I'll tell you a story. I went to Italy to get on a ship and outside of Rome in the little town of Civitavecchia. I'd never been to Rome before, and so I stayed at a hotel right in the city center there. And I landed, and I was at the hotel at 12 noon. I had about an hour and a half of sleep. It wasn't the lie flat beds back in the day on Alitalia. It was a horrible night of travel. I'm absolutely exhausted. I knew if I went to bed, I would sleep until 10 p.m. and then I was screwed. So I just got my stuff. I was by myself, and I walked Rome until 9 p.m., having lunch, having coffee, having dinner, going to the museums. I was so tired. I was a walking zombie. But when my head hit the pillow that night, I slept for 8 hours sound, and I immediately forced that, acclimatization or whatever the word is of getting used to that time zone. That's my tip: is don't go take a nap.
Very good.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm actually suffering. Mike and I were in Spain together last week, and for some reason, I think when you get older too, it changes. It's a bit harder to get your body back in shape. And Mike is suffering from some kind of bug he picked up. I'm suffering from just messed up sleep and jet lag.
Yeah.
Years ago, I used to follow the Jet Lag Diet, which was a book that came out in the 80s and supposedly used by American presidents and diplomats for how to manipulate light and carb intake in the days prior to your trip to get your body ready for that shift.
Okay.
Particularly at that time, I was traveling to Asia, like a 12-hour time shift, which is really brutal, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't use that diet anymore. I basically eat carbs 24/7, and it's not working.
My tip is I have a little travel sound machine. It's much better than what the app on your iPhone, and it's like $30 on Amazon, and this thing emits a white noise sound. So when you do get to go to sleep in that foreign place, that strange bed, make sure that sound and light, which is why I wear an eye mask, those will mess with you more than anything. So that is my hot tip.
All right. Well, that's good stuff. A lot of good tips.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
I am, it's good to see Bobblehead again, also, I'll say. And look forward to seeing you next week on the beautiful new Viva, getting to see it firsthand and getting to spend time with my friends at Norwegian Cruise Lines. Thanks again, John.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much. Well, James, it was great to hear from John. What a good guy, great guy to have in the business, and we're lucky to have him on the podcast.
Yeah, Bobblehead was a little tame in this appearance. You never know where that's going to go with John. I really enjoyed talking to him, and he is an extremely knowledgeable guy, one of the most in the cruise business. So it was a pleasure to have him here. And Mike, we should take a minute and just speaking of cruise, remind everyone that we're doing this incredible cruise giveaway, Virgin Voyages Cruise for Two. And all our listeners need to do is go to our website, which is oddly titled notouristallowed.com. And there you'll find the ways that you can get entries into the drawing for this free cruise by telling your friends about our podcast, by signing up for our newsletter, and so on. And then in a few weeks, just before the holidays, we'll be drawing for a free cruise for two people on Virgin Voyages, which is really special.
Yeah, and one of my friends just came back from a Virgin Voyage last week, and he said he had the time of his life. But there's only 9 days left to enter, and if you do go to the website notouristallowed.com and scroll down on the homepage, you'll see win a 7-night dream voyage with Virgin Voyages Cruise. And if you'll click into that, there are several ways that you can enter and do some things that will help increase your chances of winning this fabulous cruise. We've had a tremendous amount of people that are really getting excited about this, and we're happy to give it away, and somebody will get a early Christmas present from No Tourist Allowed.
Absolutely. So we're at holiday time already, right? So happy Thanksgiving, we should say to everyone, and happy Thanksgiving to you, Mike. And we're very thankful for you, our listeners, and we're very thankful for the opportunity to travel the world for all the reasons, the values that Mike shared at the beginning of the podcast, and especially at this time when there is trouble in the world, although when is there not trouble in the world, right? But we have some conflicts and wars, frankly, in the world. And that always reminds me that travel is the solution, right? Travel is the antidote to the ills of the world, because travel, as Mike pointed out, helps us to understand each other and value each other. We learn about other cultures. We learn about people who live and think differently. we develop empathy and compassion, we grow as people, and that's the true value of travel. And we really need travel in the world right now. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Mark Twain has a great quote that's been part of my email signature for quite a while. And he says, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, which
Love that.
That is so true. So true. But we do have a very big week ahead of us in travel. For us who distribute travel, we're not necessarily as busy this week selling travel because we've already sold the travel, generally speaking.
And we're eating.
Yeah, it's gonna travel.
We're busy eating, right?
Yeah, but we do have some additional customer service demands, making sure everybody gets, their flights are okay and their hotel accommodations are right, and so we tend to have a peak in our customer service departments in dealing with some people want to change their flights or whatever, because there are a lot of people traveling, and we know this year the U.S. government has just come out with some really interesting facts about how the travel economy has really come back, and our Secretary of Transportation came out with some stats. James, you want to share those with our listeners?
Sure. When we just TSA, who runs the security in airports, keeps account of people basically, and in the first 20 days of November, I think about 14 of those days had more people than the same days in 2019. So when people wonder, has travel come back? It's more than come back, right? We're way ahead of passenger counts from prior to the pandemic. And we've seen the results of that in the past year or two have been real problems at airports during peak times, and problems with airlines and technology and so on. So Secretary Buttigieg's press conference yesterday was about some of the things the government has done to help airlines and the airline system strengthen over the past year, so we don't have that kind of fragility in the system that led to those Armageddon weekends. So it's good news. The test of it is right now, right? So at the time you're listening to this podcast, we've just passed Thanksgiving. The couple of days before Thanksgiving, our peak travel days of the year. The days coming up just after Thanksgiving, same thing. The Sunday and Monday after Thanksgiving are peak travel days, and keep your fingers crossed. And we're hoping that we don't see the kind of stress and difficulty in the system that we saw at other peak times earlier in the year.
Yeah, and Sunday will be the most traveled day of the year. It always is, the Sunday following Thanksgiving. So if you're traveling, even on Saturday or Sunday, and I'm not one to say go to the airport early, but in this case, I would go to the airport early. Give yourself a little bit of extra time to get through TSA, because there will be, all the planes will be flying that can fly as the airlines try to garner as much revenue as possible. So the airports are going to be maxed out. So get there a little bit early, get through security, with time to spare, so you can go, have a cup of coffee or have a drink or something and relax, so you're not stressed out getting through that.
Yeah, try to carry on. Mike will always tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
Carry on rather than check your luggage. And if you haven't joined either TSA PreCheck or, my favorite, which is Clear, you can do it. You can do it right at the airport. You can join Clear. It takes 5 minutes. You walk over to the Clear people and they'll take care of you. And you cut the line, basically. You skip the whole security line. So I think now is a good time of year to be thankful that you joined Clear, or if you're traveling internationally, Global Entry is the program you want to join. Have both of them if you're traveling a lot. And boy, it'll take a lot of time out of your difficulties at the airport. And the other thing that I've been doing more of lately than I ever did before is using a car service to go to the airport, because then I don't have to deal with the parking or, dragging my luggage around, getting from the parking to the airport. At the new, where I live in New York, at the new Terminal A at Newark, which is a beautiful terminal that services mostly United, I checked. The parking garage is a quarter of a mile from the front of the
Wow.
terminal. So it's really long. A car service drops you off right at curbside. And for me, that does save time and stress and my shoulder,
Yeah, well, especially when you're lugging 3 or 4 bags in.
like
Just
I am.
the one thing about Clear and TSA is if you have Clear and you don't have TSA, you still have to go through the normal lines, which means you have to take your shoes off and put your feet on those grubby little spots that everybody else puts their disgusting feet on. And if you can imagine, tens of thousands of people putting their feet on those same spots, it doesn't sound real appealing. But I will tell you one tip if you have to do that, and that is to wear 2 pairs of socks. And you wear 2 pairs of socks, take your shoes off, and then you stand in the security thing, hold your hand up, and then when you get done, as you're getting ready to put your shoes back on, you take the grubby socks off and stick those in your bag.
Throw them away. I think that's a great tip, Mike. But what troubles me more is I see a lot of people who go through those security lines. They take their shoes off. They have no socks on, and they walk barefoot through that. See, who are those people? What are you doing? Stop. It's disgusting, and you're going to get a terrible disease. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do it.
Anyway, so some holiday travel tips. If you're bringing gifts, by the way, do not wrap them going through security, because they will make you unwrap them sometimes in order to check them. So don't wrap your gifts. They don't like that. And we have lots of other holiday travels. You can Google them. There's lots of lists out there. On my company website, we have holiday travel tips, some good ideas to get you through without any trouble and kind of speed your way through the airport. But in any case, we hope you get to family, friends, or whatever you're doing for fun for the holidays without any trouble at all. We hope you use this week to travel around a little bit, or the coming weeks in the coming holidays in December. It's a great time to travel. There are great things to do. You could be on Mike did this. You could be on a river cruise in Europe, visiting the Christmas markets in Austria and Germany. This is the land of Christmas. This is where Christmas comes from.
That's right. Kris Kringle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or doing any number of other things for the holidays. Get out there and celebrate with travel.
But I will say this, if you're interested in going somewhere over the Christmas break, you need to book now, because space is really, really tight. This year,
you're late already.
Yeah, you're definitely late, but there are some things to be found. But I would not.
People like to do cruises. They like to do cruises, even over New Year's, and celebrate New Year's Eve on a cruise.
It's a great way to do it.
Talk to a professional travel advisor. They'll have tons of great ideas for you and take good care of you.
Yep. And this week being Thanksgiving, for those listeners in the U.S., take some time to give thanks for all the good things that we've got. We've got a lot of freedoms. We have, a great country to live in that, despite what others say, do good around the world for the most part, and something to be proud of. But give thanks for your health and your family, and enjoy your time.
Count your blessings. I will be on the new Norwegian Viva for the inaugural and the christening next week in Miami, and then we're doing a short sailing. Mike and I will be in Orlando and then Cancun for some industry events. Looking forward to that. I mean, we're traveling right up the next 3 weeks. I'm on the road the whole time, right up until the Christmas holidays, then back in New York with my family. So really looking forward to that. We thank you guys for joining us at No Tourists Allowed. Hope you had a good time. Be with us again next week and try to win that cruise, that Virgin Voyages cruise for two.
Absolutely. Thanks. Goodbye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.